All right, and we're back for another episode of Inside Sports Fantasy Football. It's Gerald Glassford coming right back at you here from Pop Culture Cosmos, Inside Sports Fantasy Football, the Lakers Fast Break, and Game Source. We truly appreciate everyone out there listening to all of our great shows. If you can, please give us that 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Plus, if you can like, share, subscribe, whatever you can do to help us out, it is truly appreciated. Well, week 1 in the NFL is done, and I know a lot of fantasy owners are panicking right now, ready to hit that panic button because their team really did lousy this weekend. Plus, there's also a lot of people out there ready to go ahead and crown themselves the champion already in week 1, which we know right now is not necessarily the case on either account. But here today to talk to me about that, what's going on as far as week 2 is concerned, and also what would happen with our challenge, our Pick'em challenge this weekend, is a good man indeed. You got to go ahead and follow him either on LinkedIn or also as well, go ahead on Twitter at Chris L Sports on Twitter. Is a good man indeed from Inside Sports, who I accidentally almost kind of phrased around that he was a LinkedIn stalker, which he's not, which I kind of just worded out last week. I wanted to go ahead and apologize again for that. It is my good friend, Chris Lardieri. And Chris, just truly glad to have you back on the program.
Gerald, great to be back. Thanks for having me.
Oh, no problem. Great to be back on the show talking Inside Sports Fantasy Football and all that. Week 1, very interesting. Let me ask you this. If you're a fantasy owner out there and you had a poor performance, and I mean a really poor performance, is it too early to hit the panic button?
No, it's not, but you need to be proactive on the waiver wire. So I have 2 teams. One did great. The other one did lousy. And function of that is guys just not performing. Kenny Golladay is a receiver on one of my teams, didn't even play. So there are a number of factors there. What I would say is if you're the holder of a running back like a Kerryon Johnson with the Lions and Adrian Peterson's looking like he's going to get the majority of the carries, you should probably go out there in waivers and look to get him or maybe another running back. James Conner got banged up with the Steelers against the Giants on Monday night. You may want to take that into account and handcuff him with his backup. There are any number of things you can do. There's still a lot of depth at wide receiver. There's still a lot of depth at quarterback in some leagues where you could pick up a backup if perhaps even if you've got a solid number 1, who knows if he gets hurt or comes down with COVID, you're up the creek. So not entirely time to panic, but you need to start paying attention to your team. And week 1 is when there's the most availability on waivers to help you.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of good options out there even right now, or seeking a trade earlier rather than later is always a good thing. One thing I do, which puzzles a lot of people, but sometimes it pays off in spades, is I actually sacrifice some depth in order to go ahead and get some extra quarterbacks. And I mean top of the line quarterbacks. So right now on my team, I have Tom Brady, I have Jared Goff, I have Kyler Murray, and I also have Deshaun Watson. So wow. A bevy of quarterbacks right there for you. And I still have a quality enough team that I went ahead and I won my game. So I ask you this, my friend. It's a different approach that I always take, whether I get 3 or 4 quarterbacks of the top line, just attractive enough, because I like to try and draw out all the quarterbacks there. So in case somebody wants to or needs to trade for some depth, I think if you have that kind of depth and you want to go ahead and start asking as far as trades for out there, I think now's the time to do it.
Definitely. And what you've got there is a bevy of trade bait. And then on top of that, too, if you don't get an offer you like here in week 1, we haven't hit bye weeks yet. So you're not going to have any issues with needing to plug in a tight end or a kicker or anything like that. So you can wait out another week. Brady had a disappointing performance. Same with Watson. Maybe they rally this week and you trade a little higher.
Well, he actually wasn't that bad of a weekend for I know he had the 2 interceptions, the pick sixes, but he did run for a touchdown, which offset that.
Yeah, that's kind of like the unicorn of fantasy football, Tom Brady running for a touchdown. So you really lucked out there.
So what do you think, according to Rockout, who's joining us, and thank you so much for watching, what do you think about Kupp's outlook? Cooper Kupp, his outlook is going to be thinking, do you think you should be buying low, or do you right now, because Robert Woods really was the one that was played well for the Rams this weekend, but when it comes to Cooper Kupp, what are your thoughts on him right now?
I own him in a league. I'm definitely high on him. I know it was one game and he didn't get a lot of looks, but he was out there on the field. He was involved in the offense. The only concern I ever have with Cup, and this has nothing to do with what he does on the field, is just being able to stay on the field. You know, he's had injuries a few times throughout his career, including a bad knee injury a few years back. Now, I'm not saying by any means he's going to have that. I think the risk is more injury than it is being involved in the Rams offense. I think the ball will be spread evenly between he and Woods. And you got to remember, too, McVay put in kind of a game plan to control the ball. Three-headed monster at running back. They really ate up clock and owned time of possession. And then when they got down in the red zone, really couldn't score. So too many field goals they'd had to settle for. So I think Cup will come back to normal. It's only 1 week. If anything, I think it's a function of game planning more than anything that Cup's doing.
Absolutely. Though I have Robert Woods, so I'm hoping it won't be that much of a diversion of the game plan. I think it's up to Jared Goff. If Jared Goff is playing anywhere near at the level he was 2 years ago, I think you're going to have Cup and Woods both prospering, because as you could see from 2 years ago, they had an offense that everybody was getting good numbers off of. So everybody, delved into the riches into that. So I'm hoping that Jared Goff and that offense can just get back into form. I know they had a misstep last year, but I'm looking forward to seeing what they could do this year. And especially, like I was saying, I have him as one of my 4 quarterbacks. I'd love to go ahead and see him become valuable in a trade.
I think he can. The difference 2 years ago is he had a healthy Todd Gurley. Now, I'm not saying any of those 3 running backs, Brown, Henderson, or Akers, are Todd Gurley, but what I will say is you look at the way they were running the ball effectively, that helps Goff immensely. It sets up the play action, which is his bread and butter, and I think that'll reduce a lot of the stress that he saw last year.
Well, you talked about running back, and you also talked about Tom Brady already. You mentioned him, but let's go to Tom Brady first. Are you panicking on Tom Brady right now with this new offense? Because I don't think I would push the panic button yet. I would still say if he's your best or well-named, player on the roster, then I would say you might want to stick with him for another week and see how it goes. But again, you need to be wary that he is not playing in the New England offense anymore.
Yeah, I think I'd be wary in the respect that if you've got him as your number 1 quarterback, you may want to hope you've got a good backup. And not only because he had somewhat of an up and down performance this past Sunday, but the way he got hit and the fact that he's as immobile as ever, you may even want to be concerned about him getting banged up throughout the year. I chalk up a lot of what happened to new team, new offense, new coach, and just not a lot of reps with the offense like you'd have in previous years, given the pandemic and the fact that sneaking into a park in the spring does not really count as an NFL practice. So don't think you need to panic yet, but I do, as an owner of Mike Evans, I worry he's already hurt with a hammy. That could have an effect on Brady. OJ Howard caught a touchdown. That was nice to see, considering I don't own him this year, and he's done nothing whenever I do. But that's one kind of thing we've seen consistency with Brady is he loves the tight end. It looks like that's not going to change.
Well, I'll tell you what, my friend, it's some great advice indeed. Once again, it's Chris Lardieri at Chris L Sports on Twitter. Thank you so much, Rock Out, for subscribing to our channel. We truly appreciate it. Miles has a question on Mike Williams. Do you think he has a high upside this week? Is he healthy? That's what because I know he's just getting back to health. I know he was talked about as far as his contributions, what he could do for you early on, because he was getting back after that, I think, that high ankle sprain, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. Yeah, look, I put my money where my mouth is on this. I like Mike Williams. I picked him up on waivers, put in a claim. We had Hardman from the Chiefs, our very last pick on one of our teams, and I figure if Mike Williams is out there and I can get him, this guy, when he's healthy, is a dangerous wide receiver. I think he'll come around physically. What concerns me is his quarterback, Tyrod Taylor. And same thing. He's kind of the new guy in town this year. I don't know what kind of repertoire they have, just doing some preseason workouts and not really live game action. I think he will come around. But worst case scenario, if they plug Justin Herbert in, from what I saw, the guy's got a big arm. He likes to throw the ball. So at the very least, hold on to Williams. I think he's got some value. I've got Keenan Allen in another league. I'm holding on to him. I just think it'll require a little bit of patience.
I agree with you on that. I think that it will require a little bit of patience I know that you don't have the same quarterback in the huddle as you did last year, obviously, with Rivers gone to Indiana. But I will say this right now, that it is going to be some type of offense that's going to have to get it out to guys like Mike Williams and Keenan Allen, especially after Keenan Allen signed that heavy-duty contract of his. So I think that you're going to go ahead and find some type of rhythm in the offense at some point. I don't think that the Chargers are going to fall off the map that badly. I think they won't have the type of season that they were looking for, but I also don't think that it's going to be as bad with Tyrod Taylor in the huddle.
I agree. And the other thing I'll say for Taylor versus Rivers last year is, Rivers seemed to be the master of forcing the ball, getting those needless interceptions. And I don't see Taylor doing that. He's not going to force the issue. He's going to get his completions. And while he's a little bit more of a game manager, I do think he'll spread the ball around. We saw him do it in his brief time with the Browns before Baker Mayfield took over. We saw him do it in Buffalo. Look, I'm not saying he's a fantasy stalwart, but he is a serviceable NFL quarterback, and some would argue, given his turnover differential, maybe not a heck of a lot of different from Rivers statistically last year.
One more thing I want to cover before we head into some matchups in week 2 and your doghouse. I will save the Pick'em Challenge for my own video coming up later this weekend, just before week 2. You send me 3 choices, and I'll go ahead and I'll announce them on the air, and then I'll go ahead and also announce 3 choices, and we'll see where we match up. Plus, I'll have the results from week 1 as well. So I'll save that for a separate video here. I'll do probably on Friday. So it's Friday or Saturday. I'll go ahead and I'll throw that up. But I want to go ahead and ask real quickly about Saquon Barkley, who really struggled against the Giants' offensive line. As someone who has Saquon Barkley as his pick, that was my first pick, should I be concerned?
You should always be concerned behind that Giants offensive line. Now, that said, as someone who owned Barkley last year, I think he looks healthy. I think that the Steelers had a formidable defense. I think they're one of the best in fantasy football, if not on an on-field basis in the NFL. I think what will have to happen is Jason Garrett's going to have to devise some schemes, maybe a little more dumping off or getting him more involved in the passing game. And the thing with him is he'll frustrate you 10 carries for 6 yards, look like he'll be getting speed, and then he'll rip off a 60-yard run or get a touchdown off a pass. So I don't think it'll be as bad last year when essentially he was playing hurt on that bad ankle, but you're going to have to have a tremendous amount of patience. This Giants line is very young. I know they're trying to retool it and improve it, but I think a lot of teams are going to come in against the Giants, dare Saquon to beat them, and stack the line and say, all right, we don't have any faith in Daniel Jones doing it. And as he matures and gets a little bit more comfortable in the passing game, we saw glimpses of that Monday night, I think that'll loosen things up for Barkley.
Before we head on out, my friend, I want to hear your thoughts on week 2 in the NFL. Are there certain fantasy matchups that you're looking forward to this weekend in the NFL?
Yeah, I mentioned him earlier. If Mike Evans is healthy, I think he's a good start against Carolina. Carolina hung in there with the Raiders, but I think especially on the defensive side of the ball, we've seen their struggles, and I think they'll continue to struggle this year. So if Brady does get back in sync, I think Evans could be one of the beneficiaries. Another play, with Marlon Mack going down for the year with the Colts, I managed to snap up Naseem Hines as a running back. And as we saw in week 1, there are a lot of committees around the NFL, but I think Hines made the most of his opportunity. I know they're up against the Vikings, but you know what? The Vikings are not as formidable defensively as they were in previous years. We saw Aaron Rodgers just completely shell them this past Sunday. So I think Hines is a good start if you need an RB2 or even a flex. And then we got Hutchinson from the Lions, the tight end. We plugged him in this week, picked him up off of waivers. As a Giants fan, I've had nothing but frustration with Evan Ingram, so we dropped him and picked him up. Say what you will about the Lions, that was a brutal loss and all, but Matt Stafford likes throwing to him, and I think that's going to continue not only here but in the coming weeks. So those are 3 guys, maybe a little below the radar, not your big name fantasy players that I think you can plug in this week.
There you go. Some great advice indeed. Once again, it's Chris Lardieri at Chris L Sports on Twitter. Also, as well, you can reach a hold of him on LinkedIn. And then for us, it is at Inside Sports FF. That's at Inside Sports FF on Twitter. Then IS Fantasy Football at yahoo.com. If you have any questions, I will shoot them over to Chris or try to answer them myself. we're both doing at least good. You said you're 50-50 on your results so far. Is that correct?
Yeah, one dud and one just lights out performance. So I mean, that's what happens. That's what week one of fantasy always seems to be about, right? There's never one where you're like, I'm somewhat happy or I'm a little disappointed. It's first game out. It just kind of seems to be fairly black and white a lot of these years, and this season's no different.
Well, I won't tell you that I won both my games, so I'll just keep kind of quiet on that one.
Good for you.
There you go. We'll see how we do on next week, though. But again, it's Chris Lardieri from Inside Sports. You got to go ahead and check out what he's doing today at Chris L Sports on Twitter. But before you on out, always a time, woof, 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 to go to the doghouse.
Yeah, last week, I told our loyal listeners how I was debating between the Rams getting 3 at home dog against the Cowboys, and the Bucks getting 3.5 down in New Orleans. Well, naturally, I went with the Bucks, and myself, along with a lot of others, were disappointed to say the least. So this week there are a couple other odd games. We're only in week 2. The bookmakers in Vegas are still trying to figure out where to place these lines. They've only got 1 week of games to base it on and no preseason. So there's a game that stood out to me. The Patriots are going into Seattle. They're getting in some places 4.5, and most years people would say, Chris, you're nuts. There's no way Cam Newton in only his second game goes into one of the most difficult stadiums in the NFL with that crowd, and they're not going to overtake Russell Wilson, Pete Carroll, and the Seahawks. Well, there's no crowd there this year. I know it's a long trip, but at the end of the day, I like the way Cam played. Belichick, McDaniels really have devised a game plan that worked with his strengths. Ran for 2 touchdowns. I don't know if that's going to happen again, but I think it gives an added dimension to that offense. And knowing Belichick, look, Wilson had a phenomenal game, but the Falcons' defense is atrocious. And at the end of the day, I just think Belichick's going to devise some sort of scheme to contain Russell Wilson. I don't even know if the Patriots win, but I think they keep it close. Maybe they lose 21-17. If you're getting 4.5, you're happy. If they only lose by a field goal and you can only find them at a 3.5 point spread, take it. I just think at the very least this will be a close game, and McDaniels and Belichick will find a way, if not to win, to at least make this competitive.
Tell you what, he is the man with the answers. My gosh, indeed. It is Chris Lardieri from Inside Sports. Again, at Chris L Sports on Twitter, or if you have a question that I can throw his way, just go ahead, hit us up, Inside Sports Fantasy Football on Facebook, isfantasyfootball@yahoo.com, or Inside Sports FF on Twitter. And we just truly appreciate everybody watching, everybody listening. We cannot thank you enough. My friend, I'm interested for what's going to happen in week 2 in the NFL. I'm looking forward to it. Looking forward to hearing your picks that can go ahead and correlate to our audience on Facebook Live on Inside Sports Fantasy Football this weekend. So before we head on out, my friend, before you give me any taste or hints or picks on that, let me go ahead and hear some thoughts on the way out.
Everyone loves to overreact after week 1. Especially Dallas Cowboy fans, separate of the OPI call, which they seem to think was controversial. I did not, but there might be a little bit of reason to panic, and it's not because of the talent on the field or Dak Prescott's contract situation, whatever it might be. Mike McCarthy, again, his decision-making in that game left me scratching my head, and it reminded me of the bad old days in Green Bay when he's still hanging on there and the team was underperforming. That would give me more cause for alarm than the actual players in Dallas. Like you said last week, I love hammering the Giants. I think it was a great performance, but the defense, a bunch of no-name guys hung in there against the Steelers as long as they could. Daniel Jones looked good on a number of drives until he made a boneheaded kind of a young quarterback mistake. So while I'm not optimistic about the Giants season, I'm pleasantly surprised that they're not as bad as they are. And then finally, from a media perspective, Gerald, I kind of hung in there for even the second Monday Night Football game, the new crew of Levy, Greasy, and Riddick. And, while I know the jury's still out on them after one game, I'll just say they're a significant upgrade from Joe Tessitore and Booger McFarland. So in that respect, I think we can have something to look forward to in the booth. And I really thought the job Chris Fowler and Kirk Herbstreit, 2 college guys, did on the Giants-Steelers game was impressive. I like what they did.
Well, there you go. There you have it. It is Chris Lardieri from Inside Sports. I will just have two words to tell you, my friend, on the weekend on one of my other teams, not the team that I have four quarterbacks. And although I wish I could have picked him up as well, but he was already taken by the time I got around to try and get him. And that was a man that I told you about last week, Aaron Rodgers. Could be a strong year for Aaron Rodgers. And if you have him on your team, utilize him as your number one quarterback. I have him as an active member of my sleeper team. So I'm truly happy about that. And I'm just going to go ahead and say this. If whatever you can do to trade for him, he's going to have a big year. It looks like he has enough around him. They actually get any kind of real boost from the outside, but he's utilizing better around the actual assets that he has than he did last year. And last year he had a pretty strong season as far as interception to TD ratio. So
yeah, as a Devontae Adams over, let's just say I agree with you, and I'm more than happy with his performance. Like we said last week, this could be a repeat of Favre 07 with the heir apparent looking over his shoulder, where he just has a huge year and takes the team on his shoulders.
We'll wait and see, my friend. But Devontae Adams, are you buying or selling at this point in time on his skill set? I don't think you're going to see like 40 points a game like you did in the last game, but I do see a very strong season for him as well.
Yeah, I think for two reasons. One, you mentioned the way Rodgers is playing and came out the gates this year, and two, he's a clear number one there. Some of these other teams, you look like Tampa, for instance, like we mentioned, where they've got two real quality receivers, but there's only one ball to share. I mean, Devontae Adams is the man in Green Bay. Even look at the Chargers too with Allen and Williams. I own both of them in different leagues, but it'd be nice if there was just one clear-cut guy. I think the perfect example, and Kyler Murray owners, I hope you listened to our advice and drafted him this year, but how about DeAndre Hopkins? I mean, he and Adams, are a lot of parallels there. You can only try and stop these guys, but they're going to get their catches come hell or high water.
I have him on one of my teams too, and Kyler Murray. I think I'm going to start him above Deshaun Watson in one of my teams. Gee, what a luxury to have there. I'll tell you what, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in week 2. Again, hang out with us on the Inside Sports Facebook page to go ahead and hear our thoughts on the Pick'em Challenge that we're doing and see what the score is right now early on between Chris and myself. Who did better in week 1? Who? You'll find out this weekend on Inside Sports Fantasy Football on Facebook. We truly appreciate it. And Chris, it's been so great having you on the show. No, this is a quick hit like people want it. They just want the big quick hit for us right here at Inside Sports Fantasy Football. So happy to see you here, and I'm hoping that you will go ahead and be here next week.
Likewise, thank you. I will, unless I hit the lottery or someone calls me to run their front office. The Jets, maybe? I don't know.
There you go. Maybe the Giants. Maybe you can help them with their offensive line.
I should be so lucky, but Dave Gettleman seems to have 9 lives there.
Well, there you go, indeed. Once again, it's Chris Lardieri from Inside Sports. Check him out, Chris L Sports on Twitter. Again, Inside Sports Fantasy Football for us. We cannot thank you enough for watching. Thank you enough for listening. Rock out. Thank you for subscribing. Miles, great question indeed. Love you guys. Go ahead and appreciate everything that you guys do and watching and listening to us right here at Inside Sports Fantasy Football.